Welcome to the Daily News Currents. Today is Monday, March 31st, and for today's headlines we have Mission South Africa, how Trump is offering white Afrikaners refugee status. A competitive race for Mike Waltz's seat rattles Republicans. Charlie Javis found guilty of defrauding JP Morgan of $175 million. As measles case rises, some parents become vaccine enthusiasts. Trump is not joking about third term, though Constitution says he can't serve. Mission South Africa, how Trump is offering white Afrikaners refugee status. The United States has banned most refugees, including 20,000 people who have already ready to travel to the United States before President Trump took office. Mr. Trump is making one exception. Almost immediately after taking office, President Trump began shutting down refugee resettlement programs, slashing billions of dollars in funding, and making it all but impossible for people from scores of countries to seek haven in the United States, with one exception. The Trump administration has thrown open the doors to white Afrikaners from South Africa, establishing a program called Mission South Africa to help them come into the United States as refugees, according to documents obtained by the New York Times. Under Phase 1 of the program, the United States has deployed multiple teams to convert commercial office space in Pretoria, the capital of South Africa, into ad hoc refugee centers, according to documents. The teams are studying more than 8,200 requests expressing interest in resettling to the United States and have already identified 100 Afrikaners who would be approved for refugee status. The government officials have been directed to focus primarily on screening white Afrikaner farmers. The administration has also provided security escorts to officials conducting the interviews of potential refugees. By mid-April, U.S. officials on the ground on South Africa will propose long-term solutions to ensure the successful implementation of the president's vision for the dignified resettlement of eligible Afrikaner applications, according to one memo sent from the embassy in Pretoria to the State Department in Washington this month. The administration's focus on white Afrikaners comes as it effectively bans the entry of other refugees, including about 20,000 people from countries like Afghanistan, Congo, and Syria, who were ready to travel to the United States before Mr. Trump took office. In court filings about those other refugees, the administration has argued that core functions of the refugee program had been terminated after the president's ban, so it did not have the resources to take in any more people. There's no subtext and nothing subtle about the way this administration's immigration and refugee policy has obvious racial and racist undertones, said Vanessa Cardenas, the executive director of America Voice. While they seek to single out Afrikaners for special treatment, they simultaneously want us to think mostly black and brown vetted newcomers are dangerous, despite their background checks and all evidence to the contrary. The program also inserts the United States into a charged debate inside South Africa, where some members of white Afrikaner minority have begun a campaign to suggest that they are the true victims in post-apartheid South Africa. Under apartheid, a white minority government discriminated against South Africans of color, and brutality and violence flourished, leading to torture, disappearances, and murder. There have been murders of white farmers, the focus of the Afrikaners' grievances. But police statistics show that they are not any more vulnerable to violent crime than others in the country. In South Africa, more than 90% of the population comes from racial groups persecuted by the racist apartheid regime. In a statement, the State Department said it was focused on resettling Afrikaners who have been victims of unjust racial discrimination. The agency confirmed that it had begun interviewing applicants and said they would need to pass stringent background and security checks. The decision to unleash resources for Afrikaners just starting the refugee process, while stonewalling court demands to process those fleeing other countries who have already been cleared for travel, risks upending an American refugee program that has been the foundation of the United States' role for the vulnerable, according to resettlement officials. The government clearly has the ability to process applications when it wants to, said Melissa Keeney, a senior supervising attorney for the International Refugee Assistance Program, the group representing plaintiffs trying to restart refugee processing. Mr. Trump signed an executive order suspending refugee admissions on his first day in office, arguing that welcoming refugees could compromise resources for Americans. He added that future versions of the program should prioritize only those refugees who can fully and appropriately assimilate into the United States. A federal judge in Seattle later temporarily blocked that executive order and instructed the administration to restore the refugee program. But the Trump administration still cuts contracts with organizations that assist those applying for refugee status overseas, reducing the infrastructure needed to support people seeking refuge in the United States. An appeals court ruled last week that the administration must admit those thousands of people who were granted refugee status before Mr. Trump entered office, but also declined to stop him from halting the administration of new refugees. The Justice Department has for weeks deflected demands from refugee advocates, accusing the administration of sidestepping the court order and delaying the process of almost every refugee previously granted a ticket to come to the United States. The Trump administration has said it has allowed a limited number of refugees who were vetted to enter the country, although the State Department declined to provide a number. Lawyers for the Justice Department have argued both that the administration now lacks resources to help thousands of refugees, and that in restarting the program, the government reserves the right to do so in a manner that reflects administration priorities. Mr. Trump has made it clear what those priorities were when he created a refugee carve-out for white Afrikaners. Mr. Trump at the time accused the South African government of confiscating the land of white Afrikaners, backing a long-held conspiracy theory about the mistreatment of white South Africans in the post-apartheid era. Mr. Trump was referring to a recent policy signed into law by the South African government, known as the Expropriation Act. It repeals an apartheid-era law and allows the government in certain instances to acquire privately held land in the public interest without paying compensation, only after a justification process subject to judicial review. Mr. Trump and his allies have for years echoed the grievances of Afrikaners. During his first term, Mr. Trump directed the State Department to investigate land seizures and the large-scale killings of farmers. Elon Musk, who was born in South Africa but is not of Afrikaner descent, has also falsely claimed that white farmers in South Africa were being killed every day. Despite the claims, white people own half of South Africa's land, while making up just 7% of the country's population. Police statistics do not show that they're any more vulnerable to violent crime than any other people in the nation. Ernest Rhodes, the former executive director of the Afrikaner Foundation, which lobbies for international support of the interests of Afrikaners, said many of his peers felt seen by Mr. Trump. But he said the creation of a new refugee program had elicited debate among Afrikaners. Many do not want to leave their home, Mr. Rhodes said, but want the United States to back their efforts to claim self-governance in South Africa. I don't know anyone, no one I'm aware of that plans to move to America, Mr. Rhodes said. People who want to come to America, we would support that. If people want to relocate to America, the farmers or Afrikaners, we think they would make good Americans. There's a good fit, he added. Zumbe Baroti, a Congolese refugee living in South Carolina, said he spent decades in a refugee camp in Africa waiting for his turn to be accepted. Those white Africans are allowed to enter the United States, but black Africans are denied entry to the United States, Mr. Baroti, 24, said in Swahili. He said the pivot away from refugees who have waited in camps for years and to Afrikaners was a form of discrimination. Mr. Baruti, a member of the Bembe people of the Democratic Republic of Congo, fled ethnic violence in the nation he was a child. He was granted refugee status in 2023, but his wife and 3 children, the oldest 6 years old and the youngest just 2, have yet to clear security vetting. He entered the United States 2 years ago, focused on getting a job, saving money, and immediately applying for his family to join him. When he entered, he said he was told by advisors helping him with his application that his family would most likely join him in 2 years. He said that seemed unlikely as Mr. Trump turned his focus elsewhere. Regarding my family, Mr. Bratti said, hope has diminished. A competitive race for Mike Waltz's seat rattles Republicans. Democrats are hoping to do better in Florida's 6th district than they did in November, when Mr. Trump won it by 30 points. Frank Crunow, a retired Navy veteran, had a question for the Republican Party volunteers at an early voting site in Daytona Beach, Florida, on Thursday. Why, he asked, were some polls suggesting a tight race for the open seat in his reliably conservative congressional district, Florida's 6th? That's not good, said Mr. Crunow, 77, a retired Republican who voted for the party's candidate, State Senator Randy Fine, because he carries the Trump banner. The race, he added, is critical. Voters in the district, which includes the stretch of coast between St. Augustine and Daytona Beach, overwhelmingly voted for President Trump. But on Tuesday, they will cast ballots in what seems to be an unusually competitive contest to replace former Representative Michael Waltz, who stepped down to become Mr. Trump's national security advisor. Mr. Fine, who is facing Josh Wheel, a Democrat and public school employee, is still widely favored to win. With the Republicans clinging to their House majority by just a few seats, it was clear this week that voters in the district are thinking about what the outcome of the race and of another race of former Representative Matt Gaetz' seat in the Florida Panhandle could mean for Mr. Trump's agenda. It's important that we keep the seats, said Doreen Colby, 74, a registered Republican who lives in Daytona Beach. We want to make sure Trump can keep doing what he's doing. After tapping Mr. Waltz and Mr. Gaetz for his cabinet, Mr. Trump quickly endorsed candidates to replace them. Mr. Gaetz later withdrew from consideration as Attorney General, but had already resigned from Congress. But while Jimmy Patronis, Florida's chief financial advisor, is expected to coast to victory in Mr. Gaetz' former district, which is extremely conservative, some Republicans have expressed concern about the 6th district race. There are nearly twice as many registered Republicans as Democrats in the district, which Mr. Trump won in November by a 2-1 margin. We have a candidate that I don't think is winning, Stephen K. Bannon, Mr. Trump's former chief strategist, said of Mr. Fine last week in his War Room podcast. On Thursday, Mr. Trump held a telephone town hall for Mr. Fine, stressing his loyalty to the administration's agenda. It's not overstating things to say that your agenda is at stake in this election, and this district can't let you down, Mr. Fine told the president during the event. Only one Democrat, former Senator Bill Nelson, has won the district in federal race since 1989. Both Governor Ron DeSantis, who held the seat from 2013 to 2018, and Mr. Waltz, who succeeded him, won it by double-digit margins. In interviews this week, loyal Republicans in the district were largely complimentary of Mr. Trump's first few months in office. They praised him for his aggressive immigration enforcement and applauded the deep cuts to the federal workforce. Their vote for Mr. Fine, they said, will send a message that Mr. Trump's actions so far are what they wanted. Leaders in both parties all talk about making cuts, but none of them do it, and Trump is the first one to actually do it, said Greg Boer, 74, a Palm Coast retiree. My theory is, give the guy a chance. For Democrats, despairing over how little legislative opposition Mr. Trump has faced, the special election is a chance to voice their displeasure. I've got to do something, said Marcia Hopkins, 63, before driving to cast her vote for Mr. Wheel, she said. She asked the construction crew working on her condominium if they had voted and offered them rides to the polling place. No one took her up on it. Pointing to Mr. Fine's high praise for Mr. Trump, Paul Hunt, 61, who works in real estate in DeLand, said of his candidate, I don't care if he was saving Bambi. Based on his affiliation, that tells me everything I need to know. Of Mr. Wheel, whose campaign workers directly reached out to him, Mr. Hunt said, he's running at the right time. By Friday, Mr. Wheel received an endorsement from Senator Bernie Sanders, the Vermont Independent. Mr. Wheel, a public school teacher for a decade, has said if elected, he would prioritize expanding access to health care and education. Mr. Wheel also emphasized his objections to cutting the federal workforce and government assistance programs. Nearly a third of the district's population qualifies for Social Security. He has also worked to convince conservative voters that he would be a voice for them too. People want a representative who will actually serve and represent them, Mr. Wheel said in an interview at Stenson University in DeLand. They don't need 200 carbon copies of a Republican Party clone, all moving in lockstep. By mid-March, Mr. Wheel had brought in nearly $10 million, while Mr. Fine had raised less than $1 million. In the final week of the campaign, outside Republican groups have poured more than $1 million into television advertising for Mr. Fine. Elon Musk and his allies have pitched in money too. Despite the national investment and high-profile visits, officials in both parties are cautioning against parsing the race's outcome for hints of how the electorate is feeling about Mr. Trump. Should Mr. Fine not do as well as other Republicans have in the district, Mr. DeSantis told reporters on Tuesday that it is not a reflection of President Trump. It is a reflection of the specific candidate running in the race. Mr. Fine endorsed Mr. Trump over Mr. DeSantis in the Republican presidential primary last year. The race drew more attention last week after the editor of The Atlantic revealed that Mr. Waltz had accidentally included him in a group chat on the encrypted messaging app Signal, in which plans for attack against Houthi rebels in Yemen were shared and discussed. Mr. Waltz had faced calls for his resignation, given the sensitivity of the military plans. There is little indication, however, that the issue would register in the special election. Some voters who supported Mr. Waltz in past elections downplayed what they perceived as an honest, if not slightly embarrassing, mistake. Others expressed confusion about what exactly had transpired. "I have no idea what Signal is," said Michael Moyer, 49, who helps run her family wholesale sleigh bell business in South Daytona and voted for Mr. Waltz in November. "What was more important," she said, "was filling Waltz's seat with someone who was like-minded." "I appreciate that the country is going in the right direction," she said, "and Mr. Fine agrees with the policies Trump is putting into place." On Thursday, Republican voters at Daytona Beach, polling place where Mr. Conroe voted, kept a watchful eye on the early voting numbers. A man driving by rolled down his window to tell them that Representative Elise Stefanik of New York would stay in her seat at Mr. Trump's request, instead of becoming his ambassador to the United Nations. "Yay!" Gisela Kolbachar, one of the lead volunteers, said, clapping in reaction to the news. She added, "We have one more person on our side." Charlie Jarvis, found guilty of defrauding J.P. Morgan of $175 million. Federal prosecutors convinced a jury that Mr. Jarvis, along with her executives, had faked much of her customer list before selling her startup, Frank, to the bank. Charlie Jarvis, who made big headlines in 2023 when J.P. Morgan Chase accused her of faking her startup customers list, was found guilty in federal court Friday of 3 counts of fraud and 1 count of conspiracy to commit fraud. She now faces the possibility of decades in prison. The bank has its own civil lawsuit on standby as it attempts to claw back some of the $175 million it paid to her company, Frank. It sued her 3 years ago, and Miss Jarvis was arrested at New York Liberty International Airport not long after that. Frank, which was founded in 2016, aimed to help customers fill out the free application of federal student aid at a time when the FAFSA was notoriously complicated. Miss Jarvis, 32, quickly became a go-to quote for journalists writing about paying for college and turned up on lists of under 30 and under 40 up-and-comers. Not long after Miss Jarvis sold Frank to J.P. Morgan, there was trouble. The bank ran a test of Frank's customers list, hoping to persuade its young customers to open Chase accounts. Of 400,000 outbound emails, just 28% arrived successfully in an inbox. At trial, the bank executive said it had opened just 10 accounts via the Frank list. It was, as the bank put it in its own legal filing, disastrous. An international investigation ensued, and the bank claimed to have found evidence that Ms. Jarvis and Oliver Amar, Frank's chief growth and acquisition officer, had faked much of its customer list. J.P. Morgan sued her, and the federal government followed with its own charges, which resulted in the verdict Friday. Mr. Amar was charged and tried at the same time as Ms. Jarvis and was also found guilty on all counts. A J.P. Morgan spokesman declined to comment on the verdict. During the trial, J.P. Morgan's bank executive said that one appeal of Frank was its promise to over 4 million customers, which detailed contact information whom the bank could pitch. The bank could hook young adults with a checking account and potentially keep them in their business through decades of mortgages and retirement savings. One striking bit of testimony came from Adam Kapner, an associate professor at mathematics at Queen College, part of the city's University of New York. As J.P. Morgan was performing due diligence, Ms. Jarvis told him she was in an urgent pitch and asked him to use synthetic data to create a list of over 4 million customers from a Frank list she supplied, which had fewer than 300,000 people on it. He asked why, according to his testimony, but she would not tell him. "I found my genius," she said in a text to Mr. Amar at the time. After Professor Kapner did some quick work, including pulling an all-nighter, Ms. Jarvis asked him to remove any specifics about the data from his invoice and paid him $18,000 instead of the $300,000 on his original bill. According to prosecutors, Ms. Jarvis and Mr. Amar knew and feared the bank was going to use Frank's list for marketing. The pair eventually brought real names and emails from commercial data providers to make it look like Frank really did have millions of customers who had given their company their names and contact information. This, too, was a rush job to avoid getting caught, according to the prosecution. It produced a text message exchange in which Mr. Marr told Miss Jarvis, "You will have 4.5 million users today." She replied, "Perfect, love you." Ms. Jarvis asked for specifics to be removed from an invoice on the transaction as well. To the prosecution, this was evidence that Ms. Jarvis was trying to hide her tracks. "Why would you make a fake customer list if you weren't lying about your customers?" Micah F. Ferguson, an assistant U.S. attorney, said in court Wednesday. As measles case rises, some parents become vaccine enthusiasts. As a measles outbreak in West Texas and New Mexico continues to grow, and other states report outbreaks of their own, some pediatricians across the U.S. say they're now seeing a new trend among concerned parents: vaccine enthusiasm. Our call center was inundated with calls about the MMR, measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine, said Dr. Shannon Fox Levin, a pediatrician in Broward County, Florida. She says parents are asking if their child is up to date on their vaccinations, or should they get another vaccine? Should they get an extra one? Can they get it early? Measles spread quickly in communities where vaccination rates are low, and vaccine hesitancy has been on the rise across the U.S. in recent years. Kindergarten vaccination rates have not bounced back to their pre-pandemic levels. Fox Levine says the recent interest in the MMR vaccine, which protects against measles, mumps, and rubella, is a refreshing change in a state where vaccine hesitancy has been growing. Florida's kindergarten vaccination rates to protect against measles fell to 88.1% in the 2023-2024 school year, below the 95% vaccination rate considered necessary to protect against outbreaks. So seeing a demand for vaccines is exciting, she says. 5 U.S. states are currently experiencing measles outbreaks: New Mexico, Kansas, Ohio, Oklahoma, and Texas, which has the most cases by far, with 400 confirmed cases as of Friday. So far this year, the U.S. has reported more than 480 measles cases in 20 states. That's more cases than in all of 2024. Almost all of the cases are in people who are not vaccinated. Parents are watching what's happening with these outbreaks, and concern about potential exposure is growing. Before the measles vaccine was developed in the early 1960s, the disease used to kill hundreds of people in the U.S. every year. In Southern Pines, North Carolina, pediatrician Dr. Christoph Dacio says he has many conversations in the recent weeks with families who are interested in getting their children vaccinated against measles earlier than what's usually recommended. The first dose of the MMR vaccine is usually given between 12 and 15 months of age, with the second dose administered between the ages of 4 and 6 years old. The Center for Disease Control Prevention says infants as young as 7 months old can receive the MMR vaccine if they are traveling abroad or are in the outbreak area. Dacio says families with children younger than 12 months are requesting the shot early, especially if they have travel plans for spring break. Several families have asked what our game plan is if we get measles in our community, Dacio said. In some cases, Dacio says his patients' families have delayed travel plans until their children are old enough to receive the MMR shot. The main thing I'm hearing from patients is not, "Oh my gosh, I'm so scared of that measles vaccine." It's more like, "Can I have one? Should I get an extra?" Dacio says. He says one mother he spoke with recently was worried about the potential that unvaccinated relatives could contract measles while flying cross country to visit her. "It's awful that this is now a discussion to have," Dacio says. Interest in vaccination have ramped up ahead of spring break travel season, says Dr. Susan Sciarretta, a primary care pediatrician in the Chicago area. "We have many patients calling us because they are traveling to either Texas or places near Texas, or states where they suspect the vaccination rates are lower than we have in Illinois," Sciarretta said. Many families are requesting early MMR vaccines. While the measles outbreaks are driving interest in vaccinations, Sciarretta says they're not the only factor at play. She says many families she works with follow the news, and they worry that vaccinations may become less accessible in the future now that Robert F. Kennedy Jr., a longtime critic of vaccinations, is the head of the Department of Health and Human Services. What I'm seeing is that there's a bit of fear among moms and dads and parents about their ability to protect their children and to prevent diseases because vaccine access is in question for them, Sciarretta says. And it's not just the measles vaccine. Sciarretta says some patients are worried about access to the HPV vaccine, which protects against human papillomavirus. HPV is best known for causing cervical cancer, but it can also cause other malignancies, including cancer in the throat and anus. Kennedy has been involved in legal challenges to that vaccine. During his Senate confirmation hearing, Kennedy said he wouldn't take vaccines away from anyone. He has called vaccines a personal choice. NPR reached out to HHS for comment about their plans to maintain people's access to vaccines. They did not respond. It is too soon to tell whether anecdotal reports of vaccine enthusiasm will help counter long-term trends towards growing vaccine hesitancy. According to one 2024 study, 1 in 5 U.S. parents are now hesitant about vaccines, and studying changes in these attitudes may be harder in the future. The National Institute of Health has funded millions of dollars worth of grants for research to study vaccine hesitancy and how to improve immunization levels. Trump is not joking about third term, though Constitution says he can't serve. President Trump said there are methods that would allow him to serve a third term in office, despite the 2-term limit mandated by Constitution. His remarks came during a wide-ranging phone interview with NBC News on Sunday. NBC News also reported that Trump said he is pissed off at Vladimir Putin for the Russian president's recent comments on Ukraine. President Volodymyr Zelensky's leadership, Trump said he is planning secondary sanctions on Russia if they do not cooperate with his U.S. brokered ceasefire proposal the two countries agreed to this last week. The call with NBC News' Kristen Walker Sunday was the second in 2 days. In the first, Trump spoke about the impact of tariffs and U.S. policy towards Iran. While portions of the transcript have been released, the audio from the interview has not been shared. I'm not joking. Trump, 78, said it in the interview that he was serious about seeking a third term in office. A lot of people want me to do it, Trump said, according to NBC News, but we have a long way to go. I'm focused on the current. When asked about specific plans for seeking this third term, Trump confirmed one method. Vice President J.D. Vance wins the White House in a future election and then hands over the presidency. Trump said there were other plans, but he refused to say what they were. As it stands, the Constitution's 22nd Amendment prohibits anyone from being elected president more than twice. Separately, the 12th Amendment says, no person constitutionally ineligible to the office of president shall be eligible to that of vice president of the United States. Changing the Constitution requires 2/3 vote in Congress or a constitutional convention, which 34 states need to request. Given a congressional deadlock, not to mention how the country is divided politically, the prospect of this appears slim. Trump did not mention the Constitution during his call with NBC News, but repeatedly pointed to his popularity. A lot of people would like me to do that, Trump said of a third presidential run, according to NBC News. But I basically tell them, we have a long way to go, it's very early in the administration. Trump's openness to a third term comes after encouragement from his most ardent allies. His former advisor, Steve Bannon, who is now a podcast host, has already endorsed Trump for a 2028 campaign. In Congress, Representative Andy Ogles, Republican from Tennessee, proposed amending the 22nd Amendment to clear way for Trump's third term just days after his second inauguration. When asked if he was joking about another presidential run, Trump said, No, I'm not joking, according to NBC News. The 22nd Amendment was ratified by Congress in 1951 after Democrat Franklin D. Roosevelt was elected president 4 times. Very angry with Putin. Trump also said he was pissed off and very angry with Putin after the Russian leader questioned Zelensky's leadership of Ukraine. On Friday, Putin called for a transitional administration in Ukraine and forced Trump to finish off the Ukrainian army, according to reports by Agence France-Presse. Trump said that these comments were not going in the right direction and threatened sanctions against Russia if they don't cooperate on a ceasefire plan. If Russia and I are unable to make a deal on stopping the bloodshed in Ukraine, and if I think it was Russia's fault, which it might not be, but if I think it was Russia's fault, I'm going to put secondary tariffs on all oil coming out of Russia, Trump said Sunday, according to NBC News. That would be if you buy oil from Russia, you can't do business in the United States, Trump clarified. There will be a 25% tariff on all oil, a 25 to 50% point tariff on all oil. Trump said he spoke with Putin not long ago and confirmed that the Russian president knows his feelings. Angry, but have a very good relationship with him, Trump said about Putin. Trump says he plans to speak with Putin this week. Last week, Russia and Ukraine agreed on a partial tentative ceasefire in the Black Sea region. The deal came after a 3-day meeting in Riyadh. Since the deal was made, both Moscow and Kyiv have accused each other of violating the agreement while continuing attacks on each other elsewhere. Trump promised a swift end to the fighting between Russia and Ukraine during the campaign. That is all for today. Thank you so much for listening. Goodbye.